following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Yo, Philly, how you's doing? Welcome to Philadelphia Baseball, past, present, and personal. I'm Bill Cachetis, your host on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Specialization has taken control of amateur athletics. The days of three-sport high school athletes are gone. It began with soccer and basketball in the 1990s. Baseball has joined the ranks more recently. By the time they are in high school, the average baseball player not only competes for his school team, but also a summer travel team, and he trains year-round at a baseball academy. While specialization may be good for the game as it is producing better conditioned and more talented players, it has also resulted in repeat use injuries, burnout, and a selfishness that places individual achievement above team success. My guest, John Cowell, director of the On Deck Baseball Training Center in Newtown Square, has had to walk a thin line between the intangible values of sport and player development. He is one of those rare teacher coaches who has a healthy perspective on a game he loves and what it can teach the youngsters who come to him to develop their skills. Since 2005, Cowell has been a baseball academy instructor specializing in hitting and infielding. A shortstop at Conestoga High School in the late 1990s, John went on to a 4-year baseball career at Shenandoah University, where he was All-Dixie Conference in his junior and senior years. Cowell also played pro ball with the Washington Wild Things of the Frontier League. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thanks a lot, Bill. I appreciate you having me on here.
Absolutely. I appreciate everything that On Deck has done for me and my boys, and it's a fine facility. So let's hear about it. I'd like to start really with your personal baseball background. You come from a baseball family. Your father, John, played at Lawrenceville Prep in New Jersey. He coached Little League and American Legion ball. Your younger brother, Chris, played in Division I at the University of Richmond. He later was drafted by the Colorado Rockies. And your youngest brother, Matt, also played at Conestoga and then went on to pitch for Division III Dickinson College. Did your father cultivate the love of baseball in all his sons, or did it come naturally?
It was probably a little bit of both. We definitely had a general sports family. I think it started more with that. It wasn't really just baseball for a while. We all pretty much played, a fall sport, basketball and baseball when we were younger. So, and to be honest, my dad he was more of a basketball player than anything else. He was a really good basketball player, but, he definitely, he was never one of those that pushed us to do it if we didn't want to. I think we all seem to have a natural drive for it. There were even another brother, not mentioned, Mike. I think me and Chris were probably the most intense about it. And even Mike pitched up through the varsity level at Conestoga. So he was very supportive overall into whatever level we wanted to take it to. He was there, but he didn't push us. I'd say if there was anything that, and maybe from my perspective, a little different being the oldest brother, I was kind of the first one to go through everything as far as, just even the tournament team for Little League. And, I made that actually as an 11-year-old and then a 12-year-old. And then, where do you go after Little League, and then going through, high school and then the recruiting process. And so, it was, I think maybe my experience where I became just a baseball player, there was maybe more, I think, focus on that, or I don't know with my brothers, maybe they looked at the older brother and wanted to follow those footsteps a little bit. Or
certainly you were the guinea pig. I mean, as you went through those various stages, it was easier for your father, who I know coached pretty much through Legion to know what worked and what didn't. And I know that he was a very successful coach. Your little league was Berwyn-Paoli, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So with that little league, which is quite an exceptional little league, you really had enjoyed an advantage of fine coaches and a great facility. But as you know, as a baseball academy instructor, so many of the kids who play Little League today never go on to play Legion or high school ball because they don't have that same type of experience. Tell us a little bit about your experience at Berwyn-Paoli and why it was exceptional.
Sure. I think looking back was maybe lucky a little bit too. I think the generation I grew up with, it was a good group of kids that were all pretty competitive. I remember the Berwyn-Paoli, major days from, when we were 10 to 12. I remember it being very competitive, but every team was good. And, there were always those teams that there was a couple of dynasties, but, anybody could win on any day because every team had definitely, two stud pitchers and guys that could hit. So, I don't know if that was more just I think there was more kids playing back then, so the pool of talent was bigger. But I think also I remember, there was a lot of the dads that coached they were all into it as well. So it was definitely a little bit of a different tone. Looking at how things go now, I definitely feel myself, I'm almost 40 now, being like, well, back in my day, it was a little different. But it definitely was. It was a little more serious, I think, from the beginning. Even in the minors, which was, I think, 9-ish and 10s, it was pretty competitive and pretty serious. So, I think things have changed a little bit in a sense, and there's always that debate we hear about that, everybody gets a trophy and that kind of stuff when you're younger. We didn't have as much of that when I was growing up, which I personally, I think is a good thing. I think when I went through it, you kind of, if you wanted to win, you had to work hard. And if you didn't make a team, our dads didn't go and start their own team. You had to work harder and try out again next year and stuff. So, but I think we had a good group of kids. We had a good group of dads, that did a really good job developing us and keeping it competitive. And they pushed us pretty hard. So
yeah, the quality of the coaching is, I know it ebbs and flows, and it really depends upon how intense, let's say, or definitely interested the fathers are in any given group or at any given time. But Berwyn-Paoli has a tendency for, having some very involved dads, and in a good way. And I know what you're talking about, having come through a competitive group. I mean, we were there with the Littles and the Phalons and came through in that, the early 2000 period. Yep. And they turned out, some very good high school baseball players and a couple, kids that have gone on to minor league ball. Yep. And it prepared you because you played in two quality baseball programs at Conestoga High School and at Shenandoah University. And I can't help but ask the question, since you decided to go into a career as a teacher coach. Who were the coaches that influenced you the most, and how did they inspire you to become a baseball teacher coach?
Sure. I guess looking back, probably one of the first was Tom Keyser, who I guess that's dating myself a little bit. He was the varsity coach at Conestoga for a really long time. And a lot of people don't know this. I actually started out at Archbishop Carroll my freshman and sophomore year, and then transferred over to Conestoga my senior year. And ironically, he was helping. He had stopped coaching he was still the gym teacher. I think he had a year or two left before he retired at Conestoga, but he wasn't coaching the baseball team anymore. So he was actually helping at Carroll's, with Carroll's JV, which I was on that team, and had met him. And to be quite honest, I wasn't very focused back then. I was playing, soccer, basketball, and baseball, and I was, was a little bit of a troublemaker. And he was the first one to kind of pull me aside and say, you could play. He was the first one that ever said, I think you could play college baseball and even Division I, if you shaped up a little bit. So, which I needed that at that time. So, and then ironically, when I transferred over to Conestoga, he was still the gym teacher there. So it was kind of one of those, an officer and a gentleman type relationships where, we battled a little bit when I played for him, but then I learned to really respect him, and he saw something in me that I maybe didn't believe in or didn't know was there yet that motivated me to maybe work harder and focus and stuff. And it ended up turning out that, it actually wasn't easy transferring, and I actually enjoyed basketball more, and I ended up getting cut from the team at Conestoga and was pretty upset about it, and was in the locker room, and he came in, and I was, having a little bit of a fit about it, and he said, meet me in the gym tomorrow and bring your glove. And I think he saw that I had kind of a fire in me that I wanted to prove myself, and I at that point I had stopped playing soccer, so baseball was the last one left. And I remember that next day he went over turning double plays at second base with me. So I would go in there at lunchtime and do some infield stuff with him and stuff. So he was actually probably one of the first ones that I had that type of, I guess, relationship with where, you pushed and he pushed back, but got me to see things in myself that I maybe didn't believe in or know were there, which I think in the end is, as a coach, hopefully what we're all trying to do is get the kids to reach their potential. And when you push them, it's because we believe that they can do better than maybe they think they can.
Absolutely.
So he would definitely be one of the first ones, was a major influence. And then the next biggest one I say is probably, I played for Coach Paul O'Neill at Shenandoah. And I would almost accredit almost everything I know about playing the game, the strategy, and a lot more, almost everything to him. I mean, he ran that program, I feel like, almost like a Division I program. And, just first and third plays, pickoff plays, positioning, a lot of base running, the finer details. I really, I always joke, I think a lot of times with these guys who coach, tournament teams, travel teams, and that stuff, I bet 90% of us still use the same sign system that we had in college because it was just drilled into us so hard that we don't know what else to do. But he was definitely a big influence there. And I'd say there's probably two more I can think of. One was I was really lucky to, like this one. Joe Sharpino was our hitting coach with the Wild Things. And
Joe Charbonneau played for the Cleveland Indians?
Yeah, Super Joe.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah. And he was the first one, which I will say, he is a little wild himself, anyone who knows him.
Yeah,
but
I remember.
Yeah. So, but I mean, when you got in the cage with him, though, he was like a scientist for a guy who was kind of goofy and fun and all that stuff. But, and he was the first one that I heard talk about hitting with like some structure to it, that it was, he always said there's three things. It's balance, mechanics, and rhythm and timing. And I had never really been taught like that, where there was like different pieces to the puzzle, and that really helped me. That's where I learned how to hit there, I'd say. And, I really accredit him that he was, and that was, I followed Kevin Long for what I teach with hitting, and I saw I had a similar experience. I met Kevin Long at a coach's clinic, and the way they just engage with they don't care who it is. If you're in the cage and you want to learn how to hit, they're so engaged with you because they're just passionate about it. But they've also learned to have some structure with how they teach it, which I think just helps players in general have more of a purpose when they practice, and a focus, versus just doing drills and kind of, I hit that one good, I didn't hit that one good, or, there's now more of a reason and something to look at as to why you're doing what you're doing or why it's not working.
Let's turn to On Deck and talk a little bit about your current profession. On Deck is a state-of-the-art indoor baseball and softball training facility. It offers individualized coaching instruction, strength, agility training, video analysis, feedback, and the programs are really designed for any level of player, whether they're Little League, Junior, Legion, high school, collegiate. The facility is gorgeous. Brand new batting cages, artificial turf, 8-tech pitching machines, portable mounds. How did you get involved in the enterprise, John?
It's an interesting story. It's pretty long, but I'll keep it brief. I had actually was back finishing school when I stopped playing baseball, taking classes at Westchester and working a couple jobs. And there was a plot of land, I think it's still there actually, right next to Field of Dreams, Vernon Paoli. And I remember driving past it a lot and was like, man, somebody should put one of these indoor facilities right here. It's, it's right next to the Little League complex. So, I had looked into it, and a good friend of mine's uncle is a real estate lawyer, and I ended up calling him at one point and realized pretty quick how much money it takes to do anything like that, and said, never mind. But he called me a few years later, and he was good friends with the owner of On Deck, Matt O'Reilly, and said, hey, there's a friend of mine who's interested in maybe opening or doing something like that with an indoor sports facility. I remember you were asking about something a while ago. I think you guys should meet. So that was kind of how it started. He introduced us, and nothing really came of it. And a couple years after that, my friend's uncle called and said, hey, remember, Matt? He's like, I think he's really going to do it this time. He'd like to talk to you. So, and it really just started, and I can't speak highly enough about Matt. He's just a great guy, and I really, in the beginning, was just kind of a soundboard for him because I had worked over at All-Star and Brew Mall, and I was down at, I think at the time, at Diamond and King of Prussia. So more just had some questions on, what do you charge to rent cages? How do you get paid? Are you a contractor or part-time employee? So just some questions like that, and he seemed like a really nice guy, and I was more than willing to help. So it kind of just started like that, and then he went ahead and got the lease on where we're at now, did outfitted the entire inside and did an unbelievable job with it. So I really credit him with the design and how nice the facility is all due to him. And then I came over to just do lessons here, and my brother was playing. He was still in the minors, and a couple of his friends were home. So I just kind of pulled together some instructors, but I had no intentions of running a facility. I was in the corporate world working 9 to 5, and that's a whole other story about the final decision to decide to run it. But I was just at a point with my other career that I had to make a choice, and this just seemed like a really unique opportunity. And Matt, I don't think I would have ever done something like this with anybody else other than him.
I'm glad you did. I mean, there are many young men who will feel confined to just stay in the corporate world and not follow their dream. And it makes such a huge difference when you're doing something that you have a passion about, and it's so clear that you do. And one of the many things that I like about On Deck is the emphasis that it places on development. You can't do that without great teacher coaches. and you've hired some wonderful ones. And many of these baseball academies, they pay lip service to the teaching part. They have teams. They focus on the winning. They focus on the for-profit end of the business. But On Deck is a different place. I mean, they really do take the teaching end of it very seriously. Tell us about your mission and some of the exceptional teacher coaches that you employ.
Sure. Again, it kind of all starts and goes back to Matt and his, I think vision for On Deck and the kind of culture we want to create here, which I think leads into the experience you have here. I think overall our goal is to be more of an individualized experience, kind of a smaller boutique type organization that starts, that whenever you're in a small organization, it always goes back to the people. You have to have the right people. But I think everyone here, and Matt really preaches this, we look at this as kind of like a startup. And the experience of the, players and the families, and we want that to be, from start to finish. So, just dealing with the front desk to scheduling to all that, it feels a little bit personal that, you leave a message, someone calls you back. After the lesson, there's some communication with the parents on what you worked on and some drills to do. If someone's not happy about something, you address it and have the conversation. You don't dodge it or avoid it. So, we've kind of come up with a slogan that says that, On Deck is where the love of the game meets the need to succeed. So at this point, I feel like, our mission is really to coach to the individual, and make it feel like the individual is getting the attention that they're looking for. So, we'll work with all ages, but in the end, we don't really discriminate in any sense. If you want to get better, we'll help you. There's not a sense of, well, you got to be like an elite player to come here or anything like that. If you want to get better, we'll come here and we'll do everything we can to help you reach your goals, whatever they are, even if it's just, to make your middle school team. It doesn't have to be a Division I scholarship.
Amateur baseball has changed really dramatically since the 1990s, and definitely since the days when I played earlier. And back in the day, the progression was Little League to American Legion. The goal of the Legion program was to prepare you to play high school ball. Those who were talented went on to play at the college level. The most talented went on to pro ball or Division I. But many baseball players back in the day also played another sport or two. And you could still do two at many Division III colleges. But today, specialization rules. If you're not playing baseball year-round, you're at a disadvantage. No longer is Legion the proving ground. In fact, many Legion programs are becoming defunct, being overshadowed by the travel teams. There are showcases, there are baseball academies, many of which have their own travel teams, as well as connections to elite scout teams sponsored by, Major League Baseball organizations. How does an organization like yours compete with the all-star baseball academies and the perfect game programs that are out there?
Sure. For us, kind of going back to the mission and the focus on the individual, with that, the way things have changed, there's more focus on, I always say you kind of follow the money. Now it's all about like hosting huge tournaments and showcases. When I was growing up, we didn't really have any of that. Just as you experienced, it was kind of, high school baseball was, I got to make the high school varsity and put up some numbers and then I'll get recruited or drafted. So, I think with an organization like All-Star, Perfect Game, they're so far beyond what we're trying to do, where to me it's almost like a cycle. It's, the academies originally started years ago to train individuals. Then it became those guys were the only ones that knew where these tournaments were that scouts might be at. So now you have to be on one of these academy teams because there's no other way to get in front of the scouts. And I think now that once these places that had a facility realize, well, wow, we can make a lot of money. We'll just let anybody come to these tournaments? But also that's where I think you said there's some lip service and stuff that with these tournaments, the scouts know they might let anybody come to the tournament, so there's 50 teams, but the scouts know where those couple of teams that have, the All-Star Showcase team, the Arsenal team, they know where those games are. So you might be on field Z because you paid the entrance fee, but does that guarantee that all the scouts that were listed on the website are going to be at your games? Maybe, maybe not. So we're, in our mind, we're going kind of back to the original of, we'll help you make that showcase team, or we'll get you ready for the college showcase and things like that. But we're not, we don't have aspirations at this point to run tournaments, or have giant showcase teams. And, if it develops into that, great. But, those guys have established themselves as such a bigger entity, that, you lose your ability to focus on the individual with that, but the individuals need what they've created as a platform to get where they're going. So it kind of all works where, I think we look at it as kind of like Apple is like, just be really good at a couple things. Don't try to be everything to everyone because, that takes a lot of time and a lot of staff. And I think if we can stay leaner and focus more on the individual, we almost don't need to compete with them at that level. There's always going to be competition because in the end, every one of those organizations has some level of teams and lessons and camps and summer camps and clinics. But that, in the end, you just have to do a better job to draw in the people, so competition is good for the players and the parents and the coaches because, when we get the opportunity to be in front of, to do lessons and clinics and camps, you got to do a better job than the other guy if you want to win the business. So,
you definitely have much greater opportunity to impact the individual than those other factories do. Those factories play to the strength of their very best players.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that an organization like On Deck preserves its integrity because they're not making promises to anybody that you can't keep, which many of the academies do. These larger academies, and there's something that reeks of dishonesty in that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, with my middle son, we went through a lot of those showcases, and we were promised that there'd be so many scouts, at our games. Well, as the saying goes, if you're good, you're going to be found by a major league scout or a Division I recruiter. And when we went to these things, these scouts, these recruiters, they knew the kids already that they were looking for, and they came to look at those kids. They weren't looking for anybody else. And you always get this line that exposure to scouts. Mm-hmm. Well, you really don't get the exposure to scouts. And when you really start to think about the numbers that are out there, the number of kids who can truly play at an exceptional level are so few and far between that these big academies like All-Star and Perfect Game, they lose sight of what this is all about, which is teaching the game and basically, yes, having fun, but good competitive fun. You just hired a director of sports performance at On Deck. to do strength training as well as speed and agility training, which has become a very important part of every baseball academies program. And your director of sports performance designs individualized programs for every athlete who trains it on deck. Let's take a high school age pitcher. What kind of program would be designed in terms of strength training and speed and agility for his specific needs?
Sure. So we recently brought on Taylor Garvin, and he joined us from Maple Zone. He had been there under Rob Rabina, who's probably one of the best in the industry, let alone the area. So, I always feel good. Anybody that's been under Rob, I know, is going to have had a really good mentor and experience. So, because they have a ton of, pro guys in there in the off season and stuff. So they're dealing with the highest level athlete, in general, and also more specifically with baseball. So, he's just hearing him talk about arm care and the way he evaluates that and stuff is, obviously a lot of this stuff is way over my head, because back in our day it was bench more, squat more, deadlift more. It was very different than it is now. So, and it's much more sophisticated, which I think is good, and which makes it more individualized. So, overall, just being around Taylor so far, it all starts with his evaluation. He has a very detailed, evaluation and assessment that he runs the players through, where that gives him a good idea of, I know he looks at like scap stability, shoulder mobility, pelvic positioning, rib cage control. So, it starts with that, but then, his goal, I think, is not only to create a program and, functional exercises that are going to enhance the performance on the field versus just I can make you stronger, which I think sometimes that gets lost in the sports performance world, that there's guys that can make you stronger, but can they make you perform better on the field? So, and I think especially with someone like a high school pitcher, you really have to pay a lot of attention to, injury prevention and arm care. So it gets pretty, and he could speak to it way better than I can, but that's why he's here. So in the end, it's a whole program based on so many different factors of the individual, let alone where are you at? Are you in your preseason? That's a different program. Are you in season? That's a different program. Are you post injury? That's a different. So, that's why we're really excited to have him, because it goes back to being able to tailor our programs all around to the individual, even down to the individual physical capabilities and how we can pull out their potential and develop them so that they perform better on the field.
You also have to keep up with some pretty huge changes that are taking place in the game in general today, and they start at the professional level and always tend to find their way down through the colleges and into the amateur, the high school ranks, and perhaps one of the biggest changes is in the teaching of hitting. Pro baseball, as well as the college ranks, are now teaching the upswing. It's part of a power hitting revolution designed to make the game more exciting for the fans. And situational hitting, it doesn't seem to be the focus anymore, at least at those levels. As long as the hitter can drive the ball deep, coaches don't want to make them accountable for striking out. And a recent article by Tom Verducci of Sports Illustrated attributed this change to three developments that have drastically changed MLB offenses: technology, analytics, and failed ball players turned private hitting tutors. And it does affect the kids. Today, most youngsters want to practice their hitting off live pitching or a pitching machine. They believe it's a waste of time to do drills like pepper, dry cuts, soft toss, or tee work, which were standard when I was playing, and even when my middle son was playing. But these were the drills that we used, and they even used 75% at one time. 75% of the hitting drills in the professional level were done off tees. How does an organization like On Deck adjust to that kind of development, considering the changing dynamics of hitting in today's game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of the hardest things to deal with as an instructor in an organization that is responsible for teaching, because you're always going to hear, well, the guy on TV, and I think that's the hard part with the younger guys is you're not there yet. So the way he swings is, and again, it goes back to coaching to the player and to the player's level, I believe, that there's, the revolution of, launch angle and exit velocity have kind of, I think mesmerized everyone with, well, that's what you have to do to get to that level. So, I mean, I deal with it all day long. I'm not a fan of it in general. I feel like that upswing, and it seems like it kind of all started with Josh Donaldson a couple years ago and his hitting coach in an interview or something. But, my argument with that I would always start with is, well, if you're going to work on hitting the ball in the air, they say that all your stats are going to go up that are important if you hit the ball in the air more than on the ground and all that. The benchmark I would say is like, okay, well, can you hit the ball 420 feet pretty regularly? If you can't, then those guys can. So if the pitcher makes a mistake, they don't even need to make a mistake. They're strong enough and all that stuff that they can get the ball out of the park. But, if you're a 13, 14, 15-year-old who just moved up to the 60, 90 field, are you hitting home runs? Absolutely. Like maybe the 0.1% kid that has just matured before everybody can. But everybody else, you're just hitting pop-ups and fly balls. So I don't see any value to that. Again, I think you mentioned a good word is accountability, which is something that's a word we really harp on here at On Deck with the players is, you need to be accountable for everything you do. But I like you said, I think there's a time and a fit and a player that stuff is good for. To me, it's by the time that has established itself with someone, they're probably already on their way anyway, because with the age groups we're dealing with, more up until high school, then they're probably bigger and stronger than everybody else if they can, hit the ball that far where it's worthwhile to work on hitting the ball in the air. The other argument I have with that is, and I know personally, I was really small growing up. I was fast. I was a leadoff 9-hole guy that, I had pretty good hand-eye coordination that it was, just, slap the ball up the middle or get on base, steal second, be a havoc on the base path. And as I got a little older and more in college, I adjusted, and I think I probably ended my baseball days known for having some power. But I was able to adjust my swing from more of a line drive hitter swing to hitting the ball in the air, but I could go back and forth. So, and I've seen line drive hitters start to hit the ball in the air and become home run hitters. I've never seen a home run hitter or a guy who hits the ball in the air go back to being a line drive hitter. And if that's not working for you, but that's all since you were a young kid how to swing like that, I think they're going to have a tough time, because in the end, hitting to me is adjustments. Some days you might have to be a line drive hitter based on who the pitcher is and what they're throwing. Going back to players not liking certain drills, to me, if you're a good hitter, you can do any drill. So and to me as an instructor, it's like, well, if you can hit the ball when it's not moving the right way, okay, then we'll move on to the next drill where the ball's moving a little bit more and a little bit more. But if there's a hole in your swing or something's off with your timing, eventually we're going to do a drill that exposes that if we're doing a good job to test you. And my job, I feel like, is trying to find the right swing style approach for each player that, again, is going to keep them in the lineup and make them successful. But I think, baseball is kind of unique where it's one of the few sports where you change the size of the field you play on kind of, midway through your playing days, where it's that 13 to 15, it's just a huge jump. And, you might as well hit hard ground balls and line drives up until that point because you're going to get hits. When you're 10 and 11, if you're not strong enough, you're swinging up, you're probably striking out a lot and hitting a lot of pop-ups and fly balls, which, in the end isn't fun, if you're getting out all the time and struggling. That's the one thing I've seen, and I think there was a stat I saw this year, and even in the big leagues where it's what everyone expects is, I think it was the first year last year where there were more strikeouts than hits, which,
right.
Is that baseball or is that home run derby? To me.
But I really like what you're saying because so many of the academies teach the one size fits all, and it's for many kids it's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. And I think what they tend to forget is that when a kid comes to you, depending upon how old they are a product of every single coach they have had since their father. And they have adopted certain techniques, certain habits. Some may be good, some may be bad. But what the role is of a teacher coach, I think, is, and especially in baseball, is something more of a diagnostician. And if it ain't broke, you don't fix it, but you tweak rather than make whole-scale changes. And I have seen kids get so frustrated when you move away from what they can naturally do as a pitcher or as a hitter or as an infielder. And, my God, there are people with the most quirky hitting and throwing styles who play Major League Baseball. Hunter Pence comes immediately to mind.
Sure.
And I'm sure if some hitting coach had imposed his, idea of hitting the baseball on Hunter Pence, he probably wouldn't have even made it to the major leagues. So there's a lot to be said for that kind of approach. John, we're just about out of time. I do want to let listeners know that we've been talking to John Cowell, Director of On Deck Training in Newtown Square. You can take a virtual tour of the facility online at info@ondecktrainingcenter.com. And those listeners who are interested in lessons can schedule them at 484-420-4680. That number again is 484-420-4680. Thanks for being with us, John, and for keeping the intangible values of the game at the forefront as you develop the next generation of ball players.
Bill, I appreciate it. It was a real pleasure.
And thank you, Philly fans, for tuning in. See you next week for another podcast of Philadelphia baseball, past, present, and personal. This is Bill Cachetis, rounding third and heading home on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.